It's fair to say that Seiko are probably the kings of affordable dive watches. The Japanese brand has established a strong reputation over the decades for making tough, functional divers that do their job very well. As a result, Seiko are held in very high regard by the watch community. Their latest SPB143 models pay homage to their first ever diver, the 62 Mass. The SPB143 is one of these new models and features a grey dial and brushed black bezel. To my mind, the 143 offers something Seiko fans have wanted for ages: a moderately sized, affordable interpretation of the 62 Mass. Until now, your only affordable option was the SPB143, which comes in at a sizeable 43mm and features a divisive broad arrow handset. In contrast, the 143 has a modest 40.5mm case, with a lug length of 47.6mm and a thickness of 13.2. It's also a much more faithful homage to the 62 Mass, and as a result, it's getting a lot of attention. So, as you'd expect from a watch that carries the Prospex mark, the 143 is a tough, practical diver at heart. With a decent 200 meters water resistance, it will certainly cover most people's diving needs. What's more, the case and bracelet have Seiko's DiaShield coating. This is a super hard coating that protects the watch from the usual minor scuffs and scratches steel picks up. And with a steel bezel insert, it can certainly take whatever most wearers will throw at it. You'll also be pleased to hear that the 143 has a sapphire crystal. For me, it's the only choice for a tool watch that carries an £1,100 price tag. Powering the 143 is Seiko's 6R35 automatic movement. The 24 dual caliber beats at 21,600 beats per hour and has a fairly average accuracy of +25 to -15 seconds per day. Though on the plus side, the movement does have a healthy 70-hour power reserve. This means that it can compete with the newer high power reserve movements made by the Swatch Group. Indeed, I'm sure any Seiko fan will tell you that their movements are capable of going toe-to-toe with the Swiss competition. As I mentioned earlier, the 143 has a modest 40.5mm case. In my opinion, this is a perfect all-round size that will look great on most wrists. Indeed, the watch wears nicely on my 6 3/4" wrists. It's the perfect width for me, and it's also not too tall, so it doesn't look out of place on a NATO. The case shape itself is heavily inspired by the angular skin diver case of the 62 Mass. However, Seiko have added some sharp, polished chamfers on each side to bring it up to date. And, as you'd expect from Seiko, the finishing is top-notch. Also, many of you will be pleased to see that Seiko have given the 143 drilled lugs, which will make strap changes a breeze. Even the screw-down case back is nicely executed, with a polished Seiko Tsunami logo at its centre. I think my one complaint about the case is that the screw-down crown is unsigned, which I think is pretty lazy for a watch that's over the £1,000 mark. However, to make up for this, the bezel action is incredibly smooth, and it offers just the right amount of resistance. It's also nice to see Seiko using something tougher than aluminium for the insert. Looking quickly at the sapphire crystal, I'd say that it's a boxed crystal, but as it barely protrudes over the bezel, you can't really tell. In many ways, this is a good thing. The less exposed the crystal is, the less chance there is for it to get damaged. Thanks to a healthy dose of anti-reflective coating, the sapphire also produces very little glare. This means that it's incredibly legible in any lighting. The dial itself is a gorgeous sunburst grey that's shade I think is best described as titanium. The colour changes subtly with the light, which really helps those polished applied markers to stand out. Disappointingly, the loom isn't printed squarely onto the markers, but it's not something you'll notice unless you look for it. Of course, it's the handset that's the real star of the show. Whilst they've got a simple shape, the finish differs on each half. One side is polished and the other brushed. This creates some fantastic light play that looks incredible from certain angles. When it comes to the loom, I think it goes without saying that it's incredibly bright. Anyone who's had a Seiko diver before knows that their loom is some of the best around, and it lasts a good while. It's just what you'd expect from a true tool watch, and it will satisfy the loom junkies amongst you. Now, I have to be honest and say that I'm not too keen on the bracelet. To be fair to Seiko, it's not that it's poor quality. There are just a few cosmetic niggles that bug me. For starters, there's a fair bit of play between the end links and the case, which isn't great for an £1,100 watch. And why they don't sit flush with the top of the case is beyond me. What's more, I think that the links themselves don't suit the watch itself. They're too curved and chunky for that sleek, angular case. The bracelet is also pretty heavy, and the watch feels really weighty on the wrist as a result. The clasp is the sort of generic threefold clasp I'm used to seeing on watches half the price of the 143. However, Seiko have added a dive extension. Though with its tension-based locking system, it feels cheap compared to the ratcheting micro-adjustment clasps we're seeing from other brands. Overall, given how much I like the watch itself, the bracelet is something of a disappointment. Though I have to admit that the finishing is good. Unfortunately, it just doesn't stop me from preferring to wear the 143 on a NATO. All this talk of the bracelet brings me nicely on to some alternative strap options for the Seiko. First up is the ZULUDIVER Beads of Rice bracelet. The links suit the retro nature of the case, and they're also nice and slim. This means that the watch is nice and light on the wrist and isn't encumbered by that chunky Seiko bracelet. Next up is our new ZULUDIVER padded tropical rubber watch strap. With its vintage roots, the SPB143 looks superb on this strap, which harkens back to the classic tropic straps you'll find paired with vintage dive watches. Last but not least is our black Pro ZULUDIVER military herringbone NATO. The NATO style keeps the watch looking toolish, but the clean black and smooth material give a very sharp monochrome look that proves simplicity is the height of sophistication. So, to wrap things up, I think it says a lot that I brought this watch for the sake of reviewing it, but that I'm probably going to end up keeping it. The 143 just ticks all my boxes for what I want from a Seiko diver. Classic looks, solid specs, and great quality. What more could you want? Usually there's something about a Seiko's design that puts me off buying it. For example, the distinctive broad arrow handset of the Samurai, or the Cyclops of the new King Turtles. But the 143 has a truly timeless design that shows unusual restraint on Seiko's part. It's because of this that the watch has such widespread appeal amongst both Seiko fans and the average consumer. Of course, the cherry on the cake is that, as well as being a damn good looking watch, the 143 is also a true diver. With a sapphire crystal, steel bezel insert, and that hefty 70-hour power reserve, I think you've everything you could want for £1,100. Oh, and let's not forget that super bright signature Seiko loom. So, all in all, it's not a stretch to call the 143 one of the best divers available at this price point. It offers both looks and quality in equal measure, and from one of the oldest and most well-respected watch brands to boot. Hi there, thanks for sticking around. I'm James, I'm a new team member at WatchGecko, and this was my first ever video, so I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe because there'll be plenty more on the way from myself and the other guys. So yeah, that's all about it from me really. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!